Hello, everyone. Good morning. It is a pleasure on my part to warmly welcome all the participants to this unassembled symposium. Thank you, Dr. Delina, for your keynote speech. And we would like to welcome Madam Vice President Robredo to the forum as well. So there are a number of questions that have been raised already, but let us go first to the presenters. We have a distinguished panel this morning, and the first speaker is the Honorable Senator Gatchalian. He is the chairman of the Senate Committee on Energy in the 18th Congress. He is known for various pro-consumer legislation, such as Murang Kuryente Act, Electric Cooperatives Emergency and Resiliency Act, Energy Virtual One-Stop Shop Act, the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Act, and Philippine Innovation Act. So, ladies and gentlemen, may I present the Honorable Senator Gatchalian. Senator, you have the floor.
Good morning, Secretary Lotilla. Good morning, Secretary Cusi, Secretary Singson, Dean Ron, and of course to our distinguished speaker, Professor Delina, and Father Jet, of course. Happy retirement, and you're leaving us with a good planet after your advocacy on sustainable energy and climate change. But let me just share my thoughts on and my observation on the power sector during the pandemic. In fact, Secretary Cusi and I, together with Chair De Banadera and Congressman Lord, has been in constant touch discussing the effects of COVID to the power sector. And we wanted to assure the public that energy security and constant supply of electricity will not be an issue here in our country. And looking at what the pandemic created, or what the pandemic, or the effects of pandemic in the power sector, as we all know, it virtually reduced the demand of electricity in our country. And later on, I think the Secretary will probably expound on that. But on the average in Luzon, about 30% of demand went down. In Visayas, about 19%, largely because of Visayas is still a residential, the demand still comes from the residential. And in Mindanao, it was reduced to about 25%. I observed that the reduction in Visayas is not so big because it's residential and islands. And but having said that, across the board, 3 islands, demand has gone down. The effects of that was quite unknown for most of us, because the first thing that came to my mind is, how are we going to assure our consumers with constant supply of electricity, considering that there were a few resolutions, both from ERC and from DOE, to help out our consumers. So if you forgo payment of electricity, who will be the entity that will be left holding the bag? Of course, Secretary Singson will say it's the GenCos, but at the end of the day, it will really be the banks who will be holding the bag. And the power sector is a very bankable sector. In my analysis of the power sector, it's really a financing business because of its nature, because of the feature of the contracts, which is completely passed through. It's basically investing now to generate power, and you will be paid over time throughout the life of your contract. So the pandemic basically had negative effects in the system, but it's only temporary in nature. So meaning once the economy jump starts, the power plants will get paid, and in effect, the banks will get paid. So having said that, the discussion with Secretary Cusi and the other stakeholders, where let's let the market adjust by itself. Let the banks negotiate with their gencos, and let the gencos negotiate with their banks and find a amicable solution, so that the gencos can constantly supply electricity. The directive from DOE to suspend payments all the way to the entire system really helped, because it's not only the gencos suspending payments to the banks, but the entire system had some form of reprieve. So that helped out in terms of stability in the system. But having said that, I just observe also one thing, that will, I think, somehow lay the case that flexibility is very important in times of pandemic. Because as we all know, coal plants have a minimum threshold when it comes to capacity. And I think Secretary Singson will expound on that later. Coal plants cannot ramp up and ramp down every day. The plants will have a lot of problems in terms of technical operation. So it has to maintain some form of capacity in order to be economical, both financially and technically. And what we observe, because demand has gone down so much that it has reached a point that running the plants became very expensive, and maintaining capacity has been very expensive. And let me just share a slide. I just want to share one slide with the body. This is a slide that we called during the time of pandemic, and we looked at the marginal cost of running a coal plant versus the loaded weighted average price of WESM. And at some point, you can see the marginal cost of running the plant, which is the red bar, has gone down the loaded weighted average price in WESM. So in effect, it's more expensive to run your coal plant by using your marginal cost versus the amount you'll be paying. So we looked at this slide because there were requests from the coal plants to suspend to suspend the must offer feature in WESM. And it is precisely, they requested that because it became more expensive for them to run their coal plants. And it became more expensive for them to operate the coal plants because in the time of pandemic, because demand has gone down quite tremendously. So this lays the case for flexibility. And let me just remove the slide. And I think what the pandemic presented to us, that flexibility is very important. And flexibility in the system is very important. And that's how renewable energy came in. Because the marginal cost of wind and solar is almost zero, it can actually supply electricity even demand has gone down tremendously. Now, the next question is, will the pandemic change the behavior of our utilities? And this is something I don't think will happen anytime soon. The utilities are used to a certain type of behavior. For example, almost all utilities want a certainty on their base load. And they want to make sure that they supply electricity in terms of base load to their consumers no matter what. That's why most utilities will contract their base load, and because of our least cost requirement, coal plants normally will fill in that base load requirement. And that's why, even though flexibility became a very important feature during the pandemic, but a lot of the utilities think that the pandemic will be a temporary occurrence once the vaccine will come out. The utilities will once again go back to their original behavior, which is we have to make sure that we have constant supply of electricity for base load. It's very challenging to change the behavior of our utilities because at the end of the day, it's the utilities that buy electricity. And one game changer that I can see, actually two game changers that I can see is, number one, if we allow financial contracts, if ERC will change its notion of contracts and allow financial contracts. We can see that in the recent Meralco CSP, although it's not formally in the TOR, but we see a lot of mixed resources in their contracts. If ERC will allow, for example, a GenCo that can package, let's say, gas and then solar or wind, and then just look at the price, regardless of where you buy your electricity, but look at the price and allow financial contracts to be supplied to the consumers. That's one of the game changers that we can see to allow more renewable energy in the system. And then another one is storage. And storage, the price of storage is going down dramatically over the past few years. But I looked at the BNEF, the Bloomberg New Energy Finance numbers, and I saw that storage is still quite expensive compared to, let's say, a coal-fired power plant, especially if the coal-fired power plant is quite old already. So storage is one technology that we need to watch closely. I believe it will go down sooner than we think because China is going into storage in a very big way, and anything that China goes in a very big way, prices will come down. But we have to keep an eye on storage because once that hits our shores, then it gives the variable RE a fighting chance to compete with traditional coal-fired or even gas-fired power plants. I say this because, again, for the utilities to change its behavior, it has to make sure that base load is supplied constantly. And if you have storage and variable RE combined, then in effect, that can supply base load to the utilities. So they won't look at whether it's coal-fired or gas, but since storage combined with RE can deliver 24/7 power at base load capacity, then the utilities will be open in looking at that. But I think an immediate game changer would be that financial contracts. And right now, ERC only allows 1:1 contracting, meaning if you want one plant, the contract should represent that one plant. But if ERC will change its dimension and allow financial contracts, I think we can see variable RE, at least variable RE, come into the system quite fast. Of course, we have the renewable portfolio standards that's coming into play. That is a lot of help. I think Secretary Cusi will probably talk about that. But again, what the pandemic presented to all of us is flexibility is very important. And flexibility will help our consumers not only deliver constant electricity to their homes, but also flexibility can reduce pricing because, as we all know, a lot of the utilities have contracted capacities with coal-fired power plants. And to just end, one of the things that I also observed that needs to be enhanced is in the demand side. As we all know, if you live in the Philippines, you probably encountered what we call a bill shock because during March, April, and May, the only estimated our bills. In June, they reconciled everything. So a lot of our consumers experience bill shock, whether it's May or June, but definitely June you will experience that. And one of the technologies that we have to hasten is the use of smart meters. And this is in the demand side. During the pandemic, our meter readers cannot go to your homes and read the meters. If we have smart meters installed all over the country, then we can read the meters even by remote. We can compute by month, because right now you cannot compute by month because it goes around. So when it starts going around, you don't know when it's May, when it's April, and when it's March. But with the smart meters, you will definitely know how much you consume each month, and you can read it remotely. And smart meters is also a very important technology to solar rooftops, because it can read the meter bilaterally. So those are the things that I observed during the pandemic, and some of the opportunities that we can use to hasten the deployment of renewable energy in our country. That's really challenging because you also are changing behaviors. And behavior of the utility firms, electric co-ops, private utilities, is not easy to change because they're used to things for decades and even for many, many years. But definitely it's a starting point because they've seen that during the pandemic, flexibility is a very important feature that we need to have in our utilities. So thank you very much. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to share my observations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Gatchalian, for sharing your perspectives on how we can build back more sustainably. I think you pointed out a number of lessons there that we can have an opportunity to discuss later in the Q&A. May I now call on Mr. Rogelio Singson, who is the President and CEO of Meralco PowerGen. Mr. Singson served as the Secretary of Public Works and Highways from 2010 to 2016. He also served as Director of Metro Pacific Investments Corporation and various private corporations in the Philippines. He was a board member at Subic Bay Metropolitan Authority, Metropolitan Waterworks and Sewerage System, and the National Power Corporation. Mr. Secretary Singson, please.
Thank you very much, Secretary Popo. First of all, allow me to greet Madam Vice President Plenary Robredo, of course, our colleagues in the panels, Senator Gatchalian, Secretary Cusi, of course, Father Jet, good morning to you, Dean Mendoza, and Dr. Delina. Again, to everyone, good morning, and thank you for this opportunity to share my views on the energy and sustainable development issues. Let me mention that relatively, I'm a newbie to the energy sector. Okay, so I keep an open mind about all of these things. But let me just follow up what was originally mentioned, that although we have seen a 25 to 30% drop in electricity, as far as Meralco is concerned, we still are forecasting a 4% average growth for the period 2021 to 2030. So we are confident that there will still be a growth in demand. Now, the second point I'd like to mention is Meralco, as the biggest distribution entity, has already adopted and put in place what we've been talking about, the energy transition plan. And we have adopted that already in our business starting 2021, which includes sustainability reporting, as well as deliberately increasing our RE sources from the current, let me again repeat, from the current of 30% renewable to as 50%. So that's already in the sustainability plan of Meralco. Now, my role, our role as Meralco, precisely to provide that transition from current sources to a more renewable energy. Let me just mention that during the first quarter prior to the pandemic, LNG supplied 39% of Meralco's fuel mix, coal was 30%, and multi-fuel, this includes at about 31%, and solar, unfortunately, was at a low 1%. So we'd like, as I said, do a transition to increase renewable to as high as 50% of Meralco's sources. Now, I'd like to commend the Department of Energy, led by Secretary Cusi, because our biggest problem, our biggest constraint, I think this was mentioned earlier, is the availability of infrastructure. We all agree, I think we all agree that there is sufficient renewable energy sources globally. But the issue is, how do you bring or how do you transmit that to the load centers? There's even, I know, a UN-sponsored organization, GEDCO, Global Energy Interconnection Development Organization, and they really want to be able to develop the technology to move renewable energy sources across continents. So admittedly, even in the Philippines, we have sufficient renewable energy, but the issue is, how do you bring these renewable energy sources to the load centers? So there is an infrastructure, and that's why, as I was mentioning, the DOE has come up with renewable energy zones in its development plan, so that they have identified areas in the Philippines where there are sufficient and renewable energy sources, whether it's wind, solar, hydro, and so on, that you need to bring them to the load centers. Now, that requires infrastructure investments. Now, so that to me is a major constraint. How will that be addressed? To be able to bring available renewable energy sources to the load centers. Now, the other point I'd like to mention is, I personally and we in MGen have adopted Laudato Si principles. This is the papal encyclical on environment. Now, so in the next 5 to 7 years, as far as MGen is concerned, we will endeavor to generate 50% of our pipeline of projects from renewable. This could be in solar, floating solar, wind, etc. Now, which means that we have to make sure that the energy transition is just. The Laudato Si principle says the primary responsibility of developing countries is its social development and poverty alleviation. So that is very clear, especially after the pandemic. Let's not even talk of economic growth. Let's just try to restore where we were in 2019. Let's not even talk of creating jobs. Let's just restore the jobs that was lost because of the pandemic. Now, so as far as the energy transition, it is maintaining and making sure that our primary objective is really social development and poverty alleviation and creating jobs. Now, I read in the IEA report that a big chunk of the coal projects that are planned for the period 2020 and forward, a big portion of that is still going to be developed coming from highly industrialized countries. Now, who created the climate change in the first place? It is not the developing countries, it is the industrialized countries. So they have to take on the primary responsibility of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. It is the responsibility of the highly industrialized countries who created the problem in the first place. Our primary responsibility as a developing country is our social development and poverty alleviation. As I said earlier, energy sources is already 30% from multi-fuels, including renewables, hydro and geothermal. Other industrialized countries are just wishfully thinking that in 5 years or 10 years, they will have as much as 10 to 15% from renewables. Okay? So I'm saying, let's do a just energy transition. That to me is important. Now, the other concern here is because of social development and creation of jobs, the government policy is still lowest cost of electricity. No? So then that's where you balance in. Now, I wish I started looking at renewable sources, particularly solar. Unfortunately, you encounter issues with farmers. Everybody wants flat land. 1 megawatt of, you need how many hectares? Now, so the issue is, do you sacrifice food production for solar? So these are the things that that has to be properly balanced. Now, if you look into new technologies, let's tackle coal, because as Senator Gatchalian mentioned, it looks like coal will still be the lowest cost of energy source. Now, there are new technologies which we call supercritical that reduces carbon gas emission by 30 or as much as 50% if you go to ultra supercritical. Now, we are trying to develop a 1,200 megawatt coal plant using ultra supercritical. We are only using a footprint of less than 50 hectares. If you want to do that in solar, you need at least 1,200 hectares of farmlands. So you can imagine the displacement in terms of food production versus. So as I said, this has to be looked into very seriously because it will also impact on the food production side of our country. Now, let me just assure everyone that yes, we are very serious. We want to move from the current energy sources and increase penetration of renewable energies in the country. But we need to address the constraints of transmission capacity, bringing energy sources to the load centers. And second, we have to make sure that we address the issue of low cost of electricity. Then third is, how do we address the impact on farmlands? Okay, so I'll leave it at that. I think we can have a discussion after. So thank you so much, Attorney Popo.
Thank you, Secretary Singson, and for emphasizing Sustainable Development Goal #1, which is the elimination of poverty, as as an important consideration in our energy agenda. Our next speaker or panelist is the Honorable Secretary Alfonso Cusi, who is, of course, everybody knows is Secretary of Energy of the Philippines. He has more than 4 decades of leadership experience in both private and public sectors. And he was entrusted by President Duterte to fast-track the development of renewable energy sources and reduce dependence on traditional fossil fuels. Ladies and gentlemen, Secretary Cusi.
Hi, good morning to our host at the Ateneo School of Government and ASAP themselves. And of course, Senator Gatchalian and to former Secretary Babes and our moderator, Sec Popo, Father Jet Villarin, Dr. Delina, and to others, present, and those listeners. Of course, I heard that Vice President Robredo is with us. Good morning, ma'am. At the beginning of this pandemic, I have been talking to my teams every day that I will meet with them and say that, this pandemic, this coronavirus 19 brought both problems and opportunities. So I said to them that, as government workers and even to the entrepreneurs, what do we look at? Do we fixate on problems or do we look at the opportunities? And I think, of course, we need to take care of addressing the disease and keep ourselves safe and healthy. But we should be looking at the opportunities, what we can do, not only in the energy industry, but overall, in our way of life. And we must really innovate. It calls for more innovation. So that's what I have been saying to my team and the challenge that I posed to them. Of course, I listened to the earlier speakers, and the latest is former Secretary Babes, where he said that they're trying to get that 50% from renewable and the solar. Actually, the government, we in the government, we've been working closely with the Department of Agriculture on the nexus of water, food, and energy. And it was mentioned that, on the solar competing with food production, that is a real concern. Some of the agricultural land has been converted to produce electricity using solar. And now what we are trying is solar on top of water, the hydro dam that we have. We're using it now for trials for solar, and also putting the food production for fishery. So closely working with the Department of Agriculture along that line. That was, we discussed this during our IATF meeting, food security. Anyway, our topic here is about energy. And actually, I prepared a paper that I'd like to deliver to you. So instead of being lost, and the fear of being lost and talking too much, I would stick and try to read the paper that I prepare. Okay, so of course it's really a pleasure to be with all of you, and it's an honor. It's a timely discussion that we're having here, and for us to share our views on how the Philippine energy sector could rise above the challenges and maximize opportunities brought about by the coronavirus disease 2019 pandemic. I would like to present my compliments to Dr. Delina for your very provoking keynote of 100% Philippine renewable by 2050. Truly attaining a secure and a sustainable energy future calls for innovative thinking, as well as the full and enthusiastic participation of all sectors of society. But before I go any further, allow me to say that I'm not and never been against renewable energy. Having adopted technology neutral policy, the very cornerstone of my policy direction caters for all possible energy solution without prejudice to or predisposition against any particular resource. Why, you might ask? Because our energy situation is very much different from other countries. We have the inadequate supply. We need to build up our capacity, and we need it now. And for those of us involved in policy and decision making, we must strike a balance between meeting our current energy needs and building a better world for the coming generations. From where we are at right now, we cannot sacrifice one in favor of the other. Wish it could be that simple. But we all know that energy sector is complex. From the exploration stage up to the development of energy resources, there are really no easy solutions. There are only hard and tough policy challenges of both threats and opportunities. And we focus on opportunities even in this time of pandemic. The COVID-19 pandemic shook the globe to its very core. All major industries were disrupted one way or the other. Throughout the pandemic, we have been conscious of the importance of energy. That was mentioned by Senator Gatchalian, that even at the height of this pandemic, during the ECQ, we were meeting virtually to make sure and to assure that we have enough power. So we have been making sure that sufficient energy is available for all. Members of the energy family immediately went into overdrive to assume what we call our backliner. I called our industry, the energy industry players from the generation, transmissions, distributions as backliners. No? Role providing of energy services for the continued operations of our hospitals, which cared for the sick. We made sure that there is power in the house, in the homes. Just imagine if there were no electricity during the pandemic, and the stay-home policy. You can just imagine that. So we assured that there will be no interruption, or at the minimum, wala sanang maging brownout. In addition, we asked our attached agencies, as well as industry players, to submit their respective business continuity plans. So, pag-start pa lang po, March 3, we had our cabinet meeting, and we were discussing this problem, the coronavirus, and we were afraid that our people in the industry, the energy sector, might be infected or contaminated. We have to make sure that our plants, that both generation, transmission, and distribution would be running. So we required them to submit to us their business continuity program, considering the different scenarios. So these business continuity plans are regularly reviewed and updated, and now include measures as we transition into the new normal. The energy industry persevered despite limited movement and threats to the personal health and safety of energy personnel. And now that we are slowly easing up restrictions to jumpstart our economy, we are strictly enforcing our COVID-19 response protocol for energy sector, as well as the Department of Energy's Public Service Continuity Plan, to uphold the occupational health and safety of our people, while we see to it that enough energy supply is available when needed. I only have gratitude and deep appreciation for the industry players, from the generation to transmission to distribution, for the hard work and dedication of the DOE family, and who risk their lives just to ensure expeditious and unhampered delivery of energy goods and services in time of pandemic. I fully support the development and utilization of our renewable resources, but without sacrificing the achievement of our energy security. Our main takeaway from the COVID-19 crisis for the energy industry is the importance of energy security. The pandemic revealed the vulnerability of energy systems. It could be interrupted. This is why the UE is looking at developing all possible energy sources, including nuclear, to help the Philippines become energy secure. Towards this end, we are further boosting development of our indigenous energy resources, and our country is blessed with abundant sources of renewable energy. These include biomass, solar, hydro, ocean, wind, and geothermal power. With this wealth before us, it shouldn't come as a surprise that our country continues to have the highest renewable energy generation mix within the ASEAN region. Based on the latest statistics, we have in 2019, renewable energy accounted for 33% of the Philippines' total primary supply. We are 10% ahead vis-a-vis the regional targets set forth in the ASEAN Plan of Action on Energy Cooperation, which seeks to increase the RE component of the ASEAN total primary energy mix to 23% by 2025. As of now, we are already at 33%. We at the DOE are fully committed to the implementation of Republic Act 9513, or the Philippine Renewable Energy Act of 2008. In fact, on the indigenous energy resource development front, since 2016, we have awarded a total of 472 renewable energy service contracts with a potential capacity of 20 gigawatts. This may translate to an additional 8% renewable energy share to our total primary energy supply. This is higher than our indicative and committed coal plants for the same period, which only has a potential capacity of 14.5 gigawatts. But among the array of our vast renewable energy resources, I believe it is best to focus on the resources that are readily available and extend all the necessary support to encourage its development. We need to maximize geothermal and hydro energy utilization, as they have proven their reliability as baseload power sources, crucial for our commercial and industrial needs. RA 9513 provides additional incentives for geothermal advancement. In addition to those, it prescribes for other RE resource development. Thus, investors need only to be encouraged to consider geothermal energy development from among their top choices. For this reason, a few days ago, I have asked my team to prepare a formal DOE order on initiatives and guidelines that would promote geothermal energy. I'm also coordinating with our PESA for the development of an economic zone that would provide clean energy to the locators. I have a little problem with this because in every international discussion that I've had, I have been inviting those who advocates clean energy manufacturers to locate in the Philippines. But our problem is that, as former Secretary Babes mentioned, it is the price, the affordability. So we really need to have that balance. But we are working now for a clean energy manufacturing economic zone. And that will be based on providing geothermal, both electricity and the heat. Our renewable energy was enacted in 2008. However, even I was surprised when I assumed office as Energy Secretary to have learned that a couple of its policy mechanism provisions have yet to be realized. Hence, we immediately went to work and have gotten the ball rolling. First, the renewable portfolio standards, a supply-side policy which mandates distribution utilities to source a minimum portion of energy from the renewable sources. This I would like to thank Yusek Wimpy Fuentebella, who really helped me in developing this policy. And second, the Green Energy Option Program, which empowers consumers to insist that the energy they consume is sourced from renewable resources. This is where we have a problem again. because those who advocates clean energy and be sourcing it from RE also, try to shy away from it, exercising that option because of the cost. So, and second is the energy option program, which empower you are also to determine to establish a green energy auction program with an initial of 200 megawatts, which will augment RE capacity in the grid. This pricing program will support RE generators in securing power supply agreements and selling their energy through the establishment of a fair baseline price. So this green energy pricing option, we allocated 2,000 megawatts purely for renewable energy. This in lieu of FIT. We shied away from FIT because FIT tend to pull the price up. When we want renewable, it is pulling our electricity price up, and that is becoming it makes Philippines uncompetitive to attract manufacturers. So we are adopting this green energy auction program that would somewhat price the renewable energy at the avoided cost. The avoided cost somewhere it is the average price that we are paying. Having recognized the value of available RE resources, the DOE is looking at other mechanisms where electricity end users can share the renewable energy generation during supply shortfalls, as well as further enhancement of existing net metering arrangement. As of now, out of the 2.9 million households, there are only 3,100 households with rooftop solar, with a capacity of around 28 megawatts. So this is where we should really focus on increasing our renewable, especially solar. If we 10% of the household to produce electricity from solar rooftop, it will really boost the share of solar. In conclusion, going back to our technology neutral policy, we have adapted it to enable our country to build power capacity, including the deployment of both intermittent and dispatchable generation without sacrificing progress in our renewable energy landscape. We must all work together to make the Philippines energy self-sufficient. We cannot be at the mercy of global market volatilities, geopolitical movement, or pandemics. This pandemic will not be the last. So we really have to be prepared. Even before the COVID-19 crisis, our tight power supplies and high electricity prices have worked against our country. They have kept foreign investors away, dampening prospects to further expedite economic progress. We have to do something to attract these foreign investors and choose the Philippines over our other competitors. We must promote the Philippines as an energy investment destination to help generate jobs and propel the country towards socio-economic development. It was reported by NEDA in one of our IATF meeting that power industry registered a positive growth during the first quarter, and it is seen as also by the investors as a safe industry to invest in, at least in our country. One core challenge, however, is that our pursuit of the common good, there are times wherein we unintentionally overlook the most of us in positions of influence also come from varying degrees and kinds of privilege. If left unchecked, this has the potential to leave our judgment dangerously skewed. To give an example, we are pleased that our country has been making strides in institutionalizing energy efficiency and conservation and transforming it into a national way of life. Yes, energy efficiency and conservation is the way of the future. It is now at the forefront of fields such as engineering, construction, and architecture. But are we still able to step back and take a look at how EE&C plays into the daily lives of average Filipinos, many of whom have lost their job due to the pandemic and are struggling to make ends meet? The minimum wattage for average lighting is about 50 watts. A 50-watt incandescent light bulb costs 58 pesos, while its LED bulb equivalent of 13 watts costs almost double at around 112 pesos. Of course, all of us here know the merits of LED technology as the longer lasting and more energy efficient bulb. At the same time, we also know that LED bulbs are the most expensive. But for someone whose main objective is to light up his home, which option do we think will he go for? The average one will most probably forego the long-term advantages of investing in a LED bulb, thinking that the 50 pesos he saved from buying an incandescent bulb would be better allocated for a kilogram or so of rice, an additional liter of fuel for his tricycle, or for his pamasahe for work. Again, such truths leave us standing at a crossroad of crafting forward-looking policies that remain in touch with our current realities. We need to ensure that there is no disconnect between the two. We must be able to effectively address the primary needs of our people, most especially in this global new normal. At the start of my statement, I stressed the importance of striking a balance between meeting our current need for reliable, secure, and affordable energy and building a cleaner and better world for the coming generation. Before I end, I pose this question for all of us to ponder. In attaining energy security, do we find a win-win solution that will be acceptable to all the concerned sectors? Ladies and gentlemen, this is a challenge before us. Surely there is no other way but to collaborate and find the answers. And I believe that with all sectors fully on board, we will overcome the worst with the best yet to come. On a personal note, before I turn over the airtime to our next speaker, I really hope that you all felt somehow safe and secure during this prolonged lockdown. Thank you very much, and good morning to all.
Thank you very much, Secretary Cusi, for outlining the sustainable energy development plans and priorities of government. I like your use of the word backliner, because one hears about energy only when there is a problem. So if there is no problem, or one doesn't hear about the energy people, then that means we're doing okay. Can we now go to the open forum or discussion? I wish we could have a more interactive exchange, but we are limited by circumstances. So let me ask Dr. Delina, first of all. This question is addressed to you. Since everyone will play an important role in making the transition to clean energy possible, how can we further engage the public and the communities in incorporating clean, renewable energy practices in their daily lives, especially after the pandemic? Perhaps you can cite observations on how other neighboring Asian countries, if any, engage their communities on the energy transition. Dr. Delina? So
Thank you, Dr. Lotilla. Yeah, so public engagement is one of the key strands of my ongoing research as well on just energy transition. I am of the opinion that community energy should be part and parcel of the energy transition, especially if you factor in justice, equity, and fairness on it. We have plenty of community energy examples actually in the Philippines. A small scale off-grid islands, for example. One thing that comes to mind is the story of Romblon Electric Cooperative, who is doing a lot of things to transition the way they generate and use energy in Romblon Islands. I've also been doing a lot of research in Thailand on community energy and seeing how ordinary Thais or ordinary citizens are actually contributing to the energy transition agenda. So providing support. So in terms of financing, in terms of capacity building is important in this regard. So we do not just necessarily need to train skilled installers, rooftop solar home systems installers, but we also need to educate and empower our ordinary consumer who will now become prosumers in the energy transition future. Ordinary citizens have an important role to play in the energy transition agenda in the Philippines. Secretary Cusi has mentioned about energy efficiency and conservation in his intervention. I'm also of the opinion that ordinary citizens can really look at demand side management as well. So looking at not only the way they can transition their technologies, but also their behaviors itself, like switching off lights when they are not used, switching off computers when they are not used, making sure that we plug out our mobile phones when the battery is fully charged. Those are very simple, mundane kind of efforts that ordinary Filipinos can do in order to participate in this movement for just transition in the Philippines. And of course, there are plenty others.
thank you very much. For those who have heard about the stimulus packages, the question to Senator Gatchalian and related also to Secretary Cusi is, would the COVID-19 pandemic prompt Congress to include energy efficiency measures and others relating to power and energy in the stimulus package? The IEA claims that such measures have a significant employment effect. So to Secretary Cusi is, if energy or power is going to be included, what are those that you would like to see in those included in the stimulus package for the power sector?
Well, thank you, Saka Popo. That was really discussed. What are the stimulus that are needed by the industry, by the energy industry? First, we all know that energy is everything is at the hands of the private sector, and that is another issue that I have been debating. That for basic services like power, should it be really given 100% the private sector? But that's water under the bridge. But just on the learning. Now, what are the stimulus that are needed? I believe that we have the Malampaya fund, and we've been saying that we should use this. We should use this in developing our geothermal. Not just on the exploration for energy development, and that fund, if used, will greatly support in the achieving energy security for the country. But we all know that part of that Malampaya fund, based on the laws the law that has been recently or last year approved, based on the bill that was filed by Senator Gatchalian, using it to pay for the stranded cost, or the UCME, the party stranded debts. to bring the cost of the energy. So I would look at really using the Malampaya Fund for to entice development in the energy industry.
Thank you. Senator Gatchalian, you might want to address that question. And there's actually a related question while you're on the microphone, which is, can you please elaborate how financial contracts will be a game changer in CSPs? Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Sec Popo. No, stimulus has been a buzzword now, no? During the pandemic. In fact, when you follow COVID-19, the buzzwords will be testing, contact tracing, and the other one will be stimulus. And in our country, the stimulus packages have been very, very controversial to a large extent because it has to be the money that will be put in as a form of stimulus should be very well studied, and it should be efficiently used. We don't have unlimited resources and we don't have unlimited funds. And the little funds that we have should be used to make sure that it's efficient and it's targeted. So having said that, just to answer your question directly, there is no stimulus package per se to the energy sector and to the power sector. What happened, as I mentioned earlier, is the market was left to correct by itself. And the correction came in when the Bangko Sentral injected close to almost a trillion, 1.2 trillion cash into the banking system. That in effect somehow stabilized the banking system and also stabilized in effect the power sector. So I know for a fact there's a lot of companies now doing bilateral negotiations in their loans because typical gearing will be probably around 40 to 60%. So they're negotiating. So that contributed to the stability of the power sector. What the power sector received from government is more of a reprieve. Our consumers got a reprieve in terms of paying their bills. ERC promulgated a new resolution giving a 4-month. You can pay your bills in 4 months if you consume 200 kilowatt hour and below. And if you consume above that, if you consume 200 kilowatt and below, you're given 6 months. If you consume above that, you're given 4 months. So that in effect was the reprieve that was given to our consumers. But what also, and I have to commend DOE, the resolution that they came out with, because they already foresaw some instability in the system. So they released a resolution or a memorandum order that will give reprieve along the value chain or along the ecosystem. So for example, I'm in the transmission sector, I'm giving a reprieve on that. If I'm in the generation sector, I'm also given a reprieve on paying my suppliers. So that in effect created stability in the system. So again, there's no stimulus per se, but there's a reprieve in the initial point of the power sector, which is from the consumers. And to discuss about the financial contracts, I think the financial contracts can be structured wherein you look at only the price and you look at the capacity or the energy to be delivered. So for example, if a utility will undertake CSP and it will require, let's say, 1,000 megawatts for the next maybe 5 years or even 10 years. You just look at how much the price that GenCos can deliver and the capacity that they can guarantee. But the GenCos will be allowed to mix and match their resources. For example, if I have a neighbor who can generate solar, and if I have a neighbor who can generate wind at night, maybe I can package solar in the morning, wind at night, and then some fossil fuel in the middle when there is no wind. But my deliverable is I will deliver to you 1,000 megawatts at this price, regardless of what type of source of energy it will be coming from. Right now, it's a 1:1 contract that ERC looks at. For example, if my contract is coal, it has to be coal lang. But we have to give flexibility to the GenCos so they can package. And this opens up some opportunities for variable RE, because we all know variable RE happens during the day or happens during the night. So that opens up some opportunities for variable RE to come into the system.
Well, thank you very much, Senator, for that explanation. We have run out of time, but I don't know if the organizers can give our speaker and panelists a few sentences to conclude. Camille, is that okay?
Sure. Yes, sir.
Okay.
That would be perfect.
So may I ask, therefore, Dr. Delina to make some concluding remarks, and then I will ask the others as well. Please.
Yeah, thanks so much, Secretary Tia. So just to conclude, again, I have to mention here energy reliability, energy flexibility, as Senator Win has mentioned. Secretary Cusi earlier mentioned about energy security. So these are actually all in tandem. So energy security, energy flexibility, energy resiliency, as I have mentioned, energy independence. But we have always to factor in the context of justice, fairness, and equity, especially in light of the ongoing crisis, the ongoing emergency, the climate emergency. It's now clear that I am for 100% renewable energy Philippines. And I'm very happy to note that the Department of Energy are actually pushing very hard to make the provisions of the renewable energy law in 2008 is now 12 years old into reality. So it's a really it's a welcoming note to mention that they are considering RPS, the auctions, and prosumership and others. But we always have to think about the ordinary Filipinos. So electricity generation is a costly endeavor, and we have to make sure that the cost is not a burden to the most vulnerable. So I'm speaking here of our indigenous peoples, of our unemployed citizens, the elderly, the LGBTIs, and other vulnerable sectors of the society. Again, I will close this intervention by mentioning that, and Secretary Cruz has mentioned this already, this will not be our final pandemic. The climate crisis will actually open up plenty of other public health issues in the years to come. So we're better prepared, we better ensure that our energy systems are secured, our energy systems are flexible, our energy systems are reliable, resilient, and at the same time that we embed in the concept of justice and fairness as we go along. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Delina. Secretary Singson? Babes?
Thank you, Popo. My closing statement is I fully support all the discussions on pushing for more renewable, but keep in mind that we have to really think about the social justice, or social development and employment opportunities, job creation that our country needs most at this time now. So we really have to go through an energy transition plan that makes sense and that addresses precisely these current concerns under this new norm. We've lost a lot of jobs. We've have to look at how much time do we really need to be able to recover our growth pattern that we had experienced the last decade. And of course, we have to also consider the government's need to precisely address the pandemic. So let's not crowd the market and put all our eggs into one basket, but really have to make it sure that the energy transition also makes sense. So I think we are very supportive of the move from fossil fuels to renewable energy, reducing carbon gas emission, but there are other priorities, especially at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Babes. We will send the questions for you as well, which we couldn't address here.
Yes, please.
Yeah, Senator Sherwin. Senator.
Thank you, Secretary Popo. Before I give my closing remarks, let me greet Vice President Lenny, who's here with us. But my default vision is 100% sustainable energy, not only for the country, but for the whole world. I think that's the default vision for everyone. But as we all know, energy is a great balancing act. I know Secretary Popo knows this very well, that you're balancing between energy security, energy sustainability, and savings, delivering cost-efficient systems to our consumers, especially in the developing nation like ours. That's why when we have hearings and we talk to stakeholders, you really see the tug of war between the consumer groups, between the environmentalist groups, and between people who advocate indigenous energy and sustainable energy. You see the tug of war there. But what the beauty about what's happening in our country is we are keeping our eyes on the ball on all these things: security, sustainability, and savings. And I thank Ateneo and Father Jet for having forums like this, because then we hear the arguments and we hear people advocating for their own advocacy and their logic for advocating that. That creates the balancing act a much more holistic and inclusive activity, because we don't want to look at just pricing alone. We don't want to look at just sustainability alone. We don't want to look at just security alone. We have to look at the entire concept and balance it very well. It's a transition, definitely, like what Dr. Delina said. The transition may take 10 years, 50 years, but it's good to have this discussion, because this discussion not only enlightens us, not only educates us, but also makes us understand the logic behind these advocacies. So thank you very much, Father Jet and Ateneo, for hosting this.
Thank you, Senator. Secretary Cusi.
Thank you again, Sec Popo. And we all know that this pandemic will bring a lot of realignment on how business will be conducted. And the primary importance, again, is power, energy. And for the Philippines, we've seen that issues like the high population density of our urban area is a concern in really controlling the pandemic. And that's why we have this program of really attracting people to go back to the provinces. We are an archipelago as a country, more than 7,000 islands. And we have been developing our power in the NCR, the capital, and the other urban cities. But there are a lot of things to be desired in our island provinces. We all know that they are still using diesel as a source of power. We have been transitioning to go hybrid. It was cited by Dr. Delina, the Romblon. We have some models that we have done hybrid, and we are addressing some problems, and it's still not inviting development. We would like to transition our island provinces to cleaner fuel, and we are now encouraging the use of gas. And this is the policy that we are adopting to identifying the provinces that we need to really transition now. We have to graduate from the household electrification thinking, policy to achieving a commercial or industrial grade of electricity in our provinces to encourage development in those areas. That's the only way that we are going to have economic developments in the area. And we all are aware that electricity or these infrastructures has to become ahead of the development before business would pour into the provinces. So these are the things that we are doing, and the policy, our policy, we will stick to our policy based on our the Philippine conditions, the landscape that we have. We need adequate capacity, and as I've mentioned this even in the international forum that I have attended, I don't care where it comes from, as long as I can, provide the capacity. From there, we are not sacrificing environment. We are transitioning. We are conscious, but primary is adequate capacity for our country so that we can progress, so that we can attract investments. And only through manufacturing and the investments that we pour into the country that we can provide real employment, real growth, and real progress for our people. Because as we continue to have lack of electricity in our provinces, we will have problems. So again, I would like to say that we have to transition from the household electrification thinking to something that will encourage commercial business activity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Secretary Cusi. And I wish to thank Dean Mendoza as well as Dr. Yap for this opportunity to join you this morning. And I hope that Father Jet finds this virtual FET Thrift as one that lives up to his expectations. Thank you very much, everyone.